The Mamluk Sultanate was a medieval realm spanning Egypt, the Levant, and Hejaz. It lasted from the overthrow of the Ayyubid dynasty until the Ottoman conquest of Egypt in 1517. Historians have traditionally broken the era of Mamluk rule into two periods, one covering 1250 to 1382, the other, 1382 to 1517. Western historians call the former the Bara period and the latter the Berger, because of the political dominance of the regiments known by these names during the respective times. The contemporary Muslim historians refer to the same divisions as the Turkish and Circassian periods, in order to call attention to the change in ethnic origin of the majority of Mamluks. Mamluk state reached its height under the Turkish rule and then fell into a prolonged phase of decline under the Circassians. The Sultanate's ruling caste was composed of Mamluks, soldiers of predominantly Cuman Kipchaks, Circassian, Abkhazian, Oghuz Turks and Georgian slave origin. While Mamluks were purchased, their status was above ordinary slaves, who were not allowed to carry weapons or perform certain tasks. Mamluks were considered to be true lords, with social status above citizens of Egypt. Though it declined towards the end of its existence, at its height the Sultanate represented the zenith of medieval Egyptian and Levantine political, economic, and cultural glory in the Islamic era. Name. The names given to the Sultanate were derived from those of the ruling sultan or the dynasty or group he belonged to, such as the Bara and Berger dynasties. Modern scholars use Dawlat al-Mamalik, which means the Mamluk Sultanate, but this name is rarely used by the Mamluks themselves. Some other less historically accurate names include Bara Sultanate, period, Dawlat al-Bariya, and Berger Sultanate, period. Al-Dawla al-Bariya, as these were rarely used by medieval Mamluk historians, but are currently used as sub-periods of the Mamluk Sultanates. One of the Sultanate's official names was Dawlat al-Atrak, Dawlat al-Turk, Al-Dawla al-Turkiya, the state of the Turks. The Arabic sources for the period of the Bara Mamluks refer to the dynasty as the Dawlat al-Atrak, Dawlat al-Turk or Al-Dawla al-Turkiya. Other official names used were Dawlat al-Jarakiza, which means the period of the Circassians. Knowing that most of the Berger Mamluks were of Circassian origin, Al-Dawla al-Turkiya al-Jarkashia is a name that indicates both a linguistic and an ethnic affiliation of the ruling sultans, its meaning being state of Turkish-speaking Circassians. Al-Dawla al-Ahiriya, which means Ahiri state, dynasty. This name is derived from the dynasty of Sultan Baybars, known as Al-Malik al-Zahir, the conquering king, and his two sons, Al-Said Barakah and Solamish. They ruled for 2 consecutive decades. Dawlat al-Kaloran or Dawlat Bani Kaloran, which means Kaloruni dynasty, is a name derived from Sultan Kaloran's dynasty ruled for over 100 years, between 1279 and 1382. Al-Dawla al-Mafuliya, meaning the Mongol state, was used during Sultan al-Adil Kitbuf's rule, who was of Mongol extraction. During Baybars al-Jashankir's short reign the state was known as Al-Dawla al-Bariya, or the Berger Sultanate, period, when in fact he ruled during the Bara Sultanate, period, but was of Circassian extraction, much like the later Berger sultans. History. Origin. Al-Saleh Ayyub, the last of the Ayyubid sultans, imported a vast number of slave boys from Central Asia and Caucasus, those who became known as Mamluks. Mamluks, the title which translates to owned slaves, distinguished this group from Gaya and Ghulam, which referred to household slaves. After thorough training in various fields such as martial arts, court etiquette and Islamic sciences, these slaves were freed. However, they were still expected to remain loyal to their master and serve his household. The Mamluks, who continued to be called freedmen, were equipped with the most advanced Eastern military technology. Such technology included stirrups and the Turkish recurved composite bow, which were used to defeat Crusader knights. Rise to power. Mamluk regiments constituted the backbone of the Egyptian military under the Ayyubid dynasty. Each sultan and high-ranking emir had his private corps, and the sultan as Saleh Ayyub had especially relied on this means to maintaining power. His Mamluks, numbering between 800 and 1,000 horsemen, were called the Baris, after the Arabic word bar, meaning sea or large river. Because their barracks were located on the island of Rauda in the Nile, they were mostly drawn from among the Cumans Kipchaks who controlled the steppes north of the Black Sea, and Circassians, Abkhazians and Georgians of the Caucasus region. Mamluks in the empire retained a particularly strong sense of Cuman identity, to the degree that the biography of Sultan Baybars focused on his birth and early years in Deshtai Kipchak. The historian Dmitry Korobanov relates how Baybar's story sums up the tragic fate of many Cumans after the Battle of Kalka River and the Mongol invasion of Europe. Roman Kovalyev states that this story can further be seen as a mechanism for the preservation of a collective memory broadly reflecting a sense of Cuman identity in the Mamluk Sultanate. In 1249 Louis IX of France led a crusade on an invasion of Egypt, capturing Damietta and then proceeding slowly southward. As they advanced, as Saleh Ayyub died and was succeeded by his son Al-Muazzam Turan Shah, but before Turan Shah could arrive at the front, the Bahra Mamluks defeated the Crusaders at the Battle of Al-Manshura and captured Louis, effectively ending the crusade. Turan Shah proceeded to place his own entourage and especially his own Mamluks, called Mu-Azimus, in positions of authority to the detriment of Bahra interests. 4 weeks after Louis' capture, on May 2, 1250, a group of Baris assassinated Turan Shah. Wars with Mongols. Following the death of Turan Shah, a 10-year period of political instability in Egypt and Syria ensued as various factions competed for control. In 1254, when a rival faction under the leadership of Qutuz became powerful, most of the Baris fled Cairo and took service with Ayyubid emirs in Syria. Meanwhile, the Mongols under the command of Hulagu invaded the Middle East in force. They sacked Baghdad in 1258 and proceeded westward, capturing Aleppo and Damascus. Qutuz and the Baris agreed to put aside their differences to face the common threat. They met a contingent of Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut and defeated them. With the Mongol threat temporarily over, rivalries among the Mamluks revived, and Baybars, a leading Bahra, assassinated Qutuz and claimed the Sultanate. Change in regime. By the late 14th century, Circassians from the North Caucasus region had become the majority in the Mamluk ranks. In 1377 a revolt broke out in Syria which spread to Egypt, and the government was taken over by the Circassians Barakar and Barkik. In 1382 the last Bahra Sultan al-Saleh Haji was dethroned, thus ending the Bahra dynasty, and Barkik was proclaimed sultan. Barkik was expelled in 1389 but recaptured Cairo in 1390. Permanently in power he founded what came to be called the Berger dynasty. Ottomans in the end of the Mamluk Sultanate. While Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II was engaged in Europe, a new round of conflict broke out between Egypt and the Safavid dynasty in Persia in 1501. Shah Ismail I sent an embassy to Venice and Syria inviting them to join arms and recover the territory taken from them by the Porte. Mameluke Egyptian Sultan Al-Ghari was charged by Selim I that he was providing the envoys of the Safavid Ismail I safe passage through Syria on their way to Venice and harboring refugees. To appease him, Al-Ghari placed in confinement the Venetian merchants then in Syria and Egypt, but after a year released them. After the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, Selim I attacked the Dul-Qadirids, an Egyptian vassal, and sent his head to Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Qansur al-Ghari, secure now against Shah Ismail I. In AD 1516 he drew together a great army aiming at conquering Egypt, but to deceive it he represented his army to further the war against Shah Ismail I. The war started in 1516, which led to the later incorporation of Egypt and its dependencies in the Ottoman Empire, with Mamluk cavalry proving no match for the Ottoman artillery and the Janissaries. On August 24, 1516, at the Battle of Majdabek, Sultan al-Ghari was killed. Syria passed into Turkish possession, who were welcomed in many places as deliverance from the Mamluks. The Mamluk Sultanate survived until 1517, when it was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Sultan Selim I captured Cairo on January 20. The center of power transferred then to Constantinople, although not in the same form as under the Sultanate. The Ottoman Empire retained the Mamluks as an Egyptian ruling class, and the Mamluks and the Berger family succeeded in regaining much of their influence, but remained vassals of the Ottomans. The Mameluke households. The Mamluks were organized into households under the leadership of an ustad. Mamluks had intense loyalty to their ustad and to their comrades in the regiment. The loyalty of a Mamluk to his comrades was called Kushdashiyah. Mamluk's sons did not enter the ranks of the Mamluks, and tended to blend in with the wider society. The ranks of the Mamluks were always replenished by importing fresh slaves from abroad.